Hey, what's going on, APUSH peeps? We got video number 32 for you, attempts to resolve slavery in the territories. Before we begin, I got to give a shout out to Mr. Sith's class from California. Best of luck. You will do awesome this year. Thanks for your support. All right, let's start off talking about a big idea you should be familiar with. And it's as the U.S. expanded, the number one issue was slavery. Please make sure you know this. And the question is, should this new land be free or slave? And there will be hotly contested debates over this question. The Missouri Compromise was an example of this, in which all land in the territory of the Louisiana Purchase above that 3630 line here would be free. Everything below would be slave. The Wilmot Proviso from the 1840s proposed that all land from the Mexican cession would be free. So all this area in orange, David Wilmot proposed should be free. That never passed, but it was a popular idea at the time. And this never became law. So the Compromise of 1850, this is what's going to settle the dispute or attempt to settle the dispute of the territory of the Mexican cession. And this dealt with land gained from the Mexican cession. And you see Henry Clay pictured right here. He was one of the key leading figures of the Compromise of 1850. So there are 5 parts you should be familiar with. The first part is popular sovereignty in the Mexican cession. So the people living in that territory, they would get to vote whether this land would be free or slave. The second part is a tough fugitive slave law, a very strict, tougher fugitive slave law that would require the North to actively be involved in the recapture of runaway slaves. This is going to upset the North tremendously and cause many in the North to become abolitionists. The abolition of the slave trade in Washington, D.C. was the third part. Not the abolition of slavery, but the slave trade, the buying and selling of slaves. That's going to be outlawed in Washington, D.C. California was admitted as a free state, the fourth part of this, and that upset the balance of free and slave states. And finally, the fifth part, Texas was paid money to give up their territory. Because if you look at this map here, this is what Texas was claiming, all this area in pink. Many people did not want that big of a state, so Texas was given money to give up this territory over here. All right, let's jump over to the Kansas-Nebraska Act from 1854. Some background info you should be familiar with is that the North wanted to build a transcontinental railroad that would go through the North and go through the Kansas-Nebraska territory. Both Kansas and Nebraska were above that 3630 line in the Louisiana territory. You can see them here, clearly above that line. Now, the South, having just lost California to a free state, is not going to allow the addition of 2 more free states. So this overturns the Missouri Compromise because they would not support adding 2 free states. So Stephen Douglas from Illinois, a popular politician from the mid-19th century, will propose the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This called for popular sovereignty in Kansas and Nebraska, so letting the people of those territories vote. The unwritten expectation, however, was that Kansas would be free and Nebraska would be slave. So you have that balance of 1 free, 1 slave state. And this will overturn the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Again, because both of those states should have been free according to the Missouri Compromise. This is going to lead to what's known as bleeding Kansas or fighting in Kansas, because a bunch of people go to Kansas to vote to try to turn it free. And fighting in Kansas between pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups will occur and really last throughout the rest of the 1850s. You have John Brown, who makes his first appearance, and he and his followers will kill 5 pro-slavery individuals at Potawatomi Creek, and fighting continued on and off until the Civil War. So this attempt to settle the issue of slavery in the territories did not succeed. All right, the Dred Scott Decision was an incredibly important court case during this time. Background info, Dred Scott, pictured here, was a slave that traveled to free territories with his slave owner. After his slave owner's death, he sued for his freedom by saying, "I was taken to free territories where slavery did not exist." So the Supreme Court, led by Roger B. Taney, will declare the following. Number 1, African Americans, both free and slave, were not citizens and could not sue in court. Number 2, slaves were considered property and could not be taken away without due process. The Fifth Amendment protects your property, and since slaves were considered property, they could not be taken away. And number 3, the Supreme Court declared that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional and Congress could not regulate slavery in the territories. This was a huge victory for the South, and the North was furious with this decision. This really helped divide the country even more than it already was. So what's the impact of the Dred Scott decision? Well, tensions will increase between the North and the South. Some sought not to enforce the Supreme Court decision, including Stephen Douglas. He basically said if people wanted to vote for a free state, then they could do that. This split the Democratic Party along sectional lines, or north-south lines, which we'll see in the election of 1860. And African Americans will be granted citizenship with the 14th Amendment in 1868. So this requires an amendment to overturn this court case. So a quick recap for this video: 5 parts of the Compromise of 1850, know all 5. Kansas-Nebraska Act, overturn the Missouri Compromise. The Dred Scott decision and its impacts, make sure you are familiar with. And all of these were attempts to address the issue of slavery in the territories. And ultimately, they all will fail because we have the Civil War. All right, look forward to seeing you back here for video number 33, the end of the second party system in the election of 1860. Things are heating up. We're getting oh so close to Civil War, and we'll find out why in the next video. Thanks for watching. Best of luck this year, and have a good day.